there, everybody. Thanks for joining us today for our speaker series. For those of you I haven't met, my name is Alexis Loving. I am our president and CEO here at Search. I am newer to this role, although I've been here at Search for over 13 years. I'm very excited to be joining you all today to share a little bit about what's going on here in Houston with homelessness, and specifically what the work that Search is doing in connecting folks from the street into housing. So we've got the chat box feature going. We'd love to hear who you are, what's bringing you here. And as we continue on throughout the presentation, if you have any questions, you're welcome to drop them in the chat box. We'll definitely save plenty of time at the end to ask questions. I love when people unmute and kind of come on and just let us know what's on your mind. It can be about something that we're discussing today, or it can just be any question in general about homelessness and our services here. The kind of purpose of doing this is really to just further engage with a community of supporters. Everybody's here today because you have some interest in this work or in this issue or in this organization. And so we want to make sure that we continue to more deeply engage everyone, because homelessness is not a solution that any single person or organization or entity can do. It takes a really great group of partners, which includes all of you. So with that, I'm going to attempt to share my screen and we'll get started. How's that working? Can I get a head nod if that? All right, perfect. It's a little tough sometimes to kind of navigate the Zoom and the PowerPoint. So just to get us started today, we're talking about the streets to housing. We're really going to focus on street outreach, experience of people, experiencing literal homelessness on the street, and what it's like to move people from the street into housing. So I introduced myself, but with me today, we have a great team here at Search helping us out in the presentation. Kelly Ward, who's our program manager with Engage and Stabilization, Phil, who's our outreach team lead, and Tiana, who's one of our outreach specialists with the encampment response team. And so as they talk, they can introduce themselves as well. All right, so just to kind of cue up a little bit, Search, we don't do the work of ending homelessness alone. We are a part of a collaborative effort with other homeless organizations here in Houston. But together, we come together to form a coalition of providers that we call the Way Home. And really what this is about is kind of changing the way that we used to do things many years ago in Houston, where different organizations and different programs from all over the place were trying to achieve very different goals, and we were all kind of fighting and competing for resources and to get the best outcomes. And so about 10 years ago, we came together to really create what's called the Homeless Response System. And it's this integrated group of our partners. We work together towards shared goals, and it's achieving a maximum impact. And so I'll share a little bit more about kind of what Houston is doing and seeing, but I think this is something that really sets us apart and is unique. Some of this was kind of a catalyst back in around 2010, 2011, when we started our coordinated access system, which is really streamlining the housing approach to make sure that people are getting into housing in coordinated ways. They're getting into homeless solutions and housing solutions that are going to most likely end their homeless situation. And that together we're coordinating and deciding what the vulnerability levels are and what the priorities are getting people in. So Houston's homeless services system is working. I love showing this diagram. It's a little outdated. The data here is from 2020, but when you compare all the different cities in Houston, we're a very proud city. We love seeing this decrease, right? So the red line is Houston's decrease in homelessness since 2011. It's now, if you pull it out to 2022, it's an over 60% decrease of people who are experiencing homelessness on the streets. And what's really unique about this is that many of the other cities, both here in Texas, but really across the nation, have seen increases or steadiness in homelessness since this same time period. So everyone is coming to Houston and wanting to know what we're doing that is working, why we're seeing such a profound decrease. At Search, we really approach ending homelessness through this umbrella of case management. And we have lots of different programs and projects here, but really everything kind of comes together under this idea that we work with individuals around their behavior, their intentions, and their motivation to work towards getting people stably housed, increasing their income, and improving their overall health. And so here at Search, we have programs that work around engaging and stabilizing people from the street. That would be our outreach teams and our stabilization teams that you'll hear more from today. It's our housing projects, which is over 800 units of permanent supportive housing and rapid rehousing. There's just two different interventions that we work to house folks in, where Search provides the case management and support to keep them there. It's employment services and income services that help folks stabilize once they're in housing. And then it's education, our House of Tiny Treasures, making sure that we're breaking the cycle of homelessness. One of the things I hear the most frequently is always, if we just had more shelter beds, people wouldn't be homeless. So shelter is one type of housing intervention in a way, but it's not really a permanent housing intervention. Shelters are temporary solutions for people to check in and out of. It's usually just a one-day stay or a one night at a time stay. It's not really a permanent solution. And so when we talk about reducing this homeless population by over 60%, what we mean is that we really move people into permanent solutions, not just shelter. So our count every year, we separate it out and we look at how many people are in our shelters, how many people are on the streets, and that's separate from how many people are in our system in permanent housing. If you add more shelter beds, it doesn't necessarily mean that people will go. Clients have choice and autonomy and independence in whether or not they want to, stay in a shelter. And what we hear from a lot of our clients is that they prefer to stay out on the street where they have more choice. They can stay with their pets, their friends, their community, and go into a shelter where there's a lot of rules. So as Houston kind of, works through our homeless solutions, we've been less focused on building more shelters and more shelter beds, and we've been more focused on these permanent housing solutions. How do we add more units of housing so that people can go to these permanent destinations versus just these overnight shelters? One of the analogies I heard a long time ago was kind of, if you have 100 shelter beds, right, and you have 100 people, those people can stay 1 year in all of those shelter beds. But if you can turn the shelter beds over and get people to go into permanent housing, suddenly you have 150, 200 shelter beds, 300 shelter beds, right, for how fast you can turn them over. And I think that that's really important. It's not about just having an unlimited supply of beds. It's really about how fast we can move people and use shelter as a support to getting people into permanent housing. The PIC count, is short basically for point in time. And so point in time is done every year in January, the last year of January. It's something that all continuums of care and systems throughout the country do. It's not a perfect count by any means, but it does give us a general sense of where we're falling year after year. And it's kind of used as a measuring stick for how we're doing. So this last count release was in 2022. The team just did the 2023 count. We should have those results here in the spring. But it shows that decrease at 60% that we talked about earlier from 2011 to 2022. So you can see that in 2022, we had about 3,200 people on a given night that were in the streets or in shelter. You'll notice that there are slight increases. Those are mostly because of Harvey or because of the uptick in COVID. But overall, this steep decrease is something that Houston is really proud of. So we're hoping to continue to see that decrease again this year, and you can kind of look out for those results. Typically, they're released somewhere between March and May. Another thing, right, that we hear frequently all the time is that Houston has one of the worst homeless problems in the country. I actually just got back from Oakland, California, where there was a national conference about homelessness. And let me tell you, everybody is clamoring to know what Houston's doing. When you compare other major cities in the US on our per capita rates, you can see that Houston has a 0.8 per 1,000 residents. And that's really remarkable when you compare it to other Texas cities, but especially to bigger cities like New York and Los Angeles, who we know are pretty comparable in size. These cities, of course, all struggle with the affordability and the cost of living. but they also have a lot of resources coming in from their cities that are helping support these initiatives. So it's pretty remarkable what Houston's been able to do with such limited resources. So while we know that we certainly do still have a homeless problem, there's no doubt Houston's doing a great job. And so today we really want to focus on how we're reducing these numbers, and that comes to our team in outreach. So I'm going to turn it over to Kelly Ward.
Good afternoon.
Let me know if you need to advance the slides, okay?
Yeah, sure thing. Good afternoon. So my name is Kelly Ward. I am the program manager for our engagement and stabilization department here at Search, and I oversee our street outreach, housing navigation, SOAR disability, and our new youth homeless program. So what is homeless outreach? So street outreach involves moving outside the walls of our agency to engage with people experiencing homelessness who may be disconnected from mainstream services and supports, who might not otherwise seek assistance or come to the attention of the homeless response system, whether because they're hidden or tucked away or distrusting of the system, or just don't know where to go or where to start the process of getting connected, especially if they're not from Houston, which we continuously see more and more of. And our street outreach teams meet with individuals who are experiencing what is called literal homelessness, which is a homeless category defined by HUD, which means that the individual or family lacks a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence, which basically just means that they could be living out on the streets, which is what we refer to as unsheltered homelessness, or in an emergency shelter, which is referred to as sheltered homelessness. And we know that sleeping outside or in places not meant for human habitation, like in a car or under a bridge, is dangerous and can even be deadly. So being able to coordinate our street outreach efforts to identify and engage people living in unsheltered locations, such as in cars, parks, abandoned buildings, encampments on the streets, can really play a critical role within the system for ending homelessness. And our community has made great strides to reduce the number of people sleeping unsheltered, as Alexis shared in some of the data she presented. So street outreach is incredibly important work designed to help establish supportive relationships, assist with basic needs, and hopefully enhance the possibility that clients will access necessary services and supports that will help them move off the streets and on the pathway towards housing stability. In order to do this, building strong relationships with people living out on the streets is essential, because there may be legitimate barriers that prevent people from accessing services. And if we can't get to the root of what those barriers are, then it'll be much more challenging for us to help get them going in the right direction, which can be very discouraging. So our street outreach teams practice what is called progressive engagement. So just to break that down a bit, engagement in this context means establishing a professional, trusting relationship between the participant and the outreach specialist by working to understand the participant's own unique situation and story as a means of building and strengthening rapport and identifying the intervention that would work best for that particular person. And oftentimes when we approach clients, our outreach teams have such a great reputation with our clients in the community that they instantly recognize our teams and know them as the ones who are going to get them connected with housing. And so sometimes on that first interaction alone, they will be ready and willing for our team to guide them towards housing. And there is a housing assessment that our outreach teams complete with the client in order to start that process. However, not all of our clients may be familiar with who we are and what we do, or maybe they've been burned by the system so many times and have had doors shut in their faces to the point that they don't want to talk to us, they don't want to hear about housing, or whatever the case may be. And when a client is presenting this in this manner, this is what we call pre-engagement, which can include what we refer to as light touch assistance. So this can be something like providing information about the outreach services we provide, or scheduling a follow-up appointment to talk more, or providing basic needs items like a snack pack or a hygiene kit to help build that trust, because we know that consistency and helpfulness is very important to our clients. Oftentimes they are approached by so many different people in the community who may or may not have been the most helpful to them, or just took their personal information and never came back to talk to them again. So there can be that sense of, how can I trust you? How can I trust that you're going to come back? How can I trust that you're going to help me when so many others in my life have let me down? So when you're still in the pre-engagement phase with a client, outreach probably isn't going to assess the clients for a housing solution on that first encounter, unless they know the client is ready and interested in doing so. So it may take repeated efforts over time to build that trust for the client to open up and share personal information about themselves, which makes total sense. Because I mean, if someone approached you out of the blue asking for your name, date of birth, and last four of your social security number, you'd probably be pretty alarmed too, especially guarded with that information, let alone any information about your health and well-being. And as I mentioned, the progressive engagement approach is designed to support the individual and their own unique situation. So some folks may not need or want more intensive services, while others may want that. So some people do refer to the progressive engagement approach as the Goldilocks approach, since this method really aims to provide just the right amount of assistance to each participant. So for example, someone who just recently lost their job and became homeless just needs some employment assistance to get back on their feet. They may just need a light touch approach. They may be overwhelmed or even offended if you were to suggest that they needed more intensive supports like case management or long-term housing. Because some folks have a lot of pride and it's hard for them to accept help. So they may just want more of a quick step up. Whereas someone who's been homeless for like many years, has a mental health condition, maybe using drugs or alcohol, may need more intensive services that case management and long-term housing can provide. So we really want to make sure that we're taking the time to listen to each and every client and show up free of judgment, and free of any preconceived notions about what they may be going through and what's best for them. And Alexis, you can move to the next slide. So who are the people experiencing unsheltered homelessness? So what the data shows, and what's consistent with what our agency sees as well, is that people who are experiencing unsheltered homelessness are typically single adult males. And I would add and emphasize single adult Black males, since they're more likely to experience incarceration at disproportionate rates, which can result in housing instability or homelessness upon release. And we do see this quite a bit of folks who present to us saying, I just got out of jail, I have nowhere else to go. And you can see too on the chart that individuals who are living unsheltered are also more likely to have been homeless on the streets for very long periods of time and have some sort of physical or mental health condition, which is what is meant by chronic. And not surprisingly, there appear to be less prevalence of veterans and individuals who are HIV positive experiencing unsheltered homelessness, because they are considered specialized populations by HUD and are therefore afforded certain opportunities for housing, shelter, and other resources that others may not. And then you can see mental illness, substance abuse, and domestic violence rates among the individuals who are unsheltered versus sheltered. And with all that being said, though, there could be different confounding variables behind some of this data, since sometimes, some of the things such as domestic violence and even mental illness and substance abuse can go very underreported given the stigma that may be associated with these. So just something to keep in mind. You can go to the next slide. And in terms of outreach best practices, I won't go through all these for the sake of time, but there are practice standards for how we conduct this work. So we spoke a bit about progressive engagement as one approach, but I did want to highlight a couple others. So if you've joined us for previous speaker series, you might have heard us talking about the housing first model. So our street outreach teams are housing focused, which means that their main objective is to help clients make connections to stable housing with tailored services and supports of their choice, such as health and behavioral health care, transportation, access to benefits, things of that nature. And street outreach does not require individuals to enter emergency shelter or transitional housing as kind of this prerequisite to access more permanent housing if they don't want to. But street outreach will make, immediate connections to immediate shelter, to emergency shelter or temporary transitional housing to provide safe options to folks who are on the pathway towards stability, if that's what they so choose. But otherwise, they don't need to be sober or, on medications or in treatment or anything like that to be able to have that support. Another one I'll point out too is just the collaboration with non-traditional partners. So street outreach efforts are also coordinated with the broader network of programs or services or staff who are likely to encounter individuals experiencing unsheltered homelessness, but it may not be their regular focus, to work with folks who are homeless. So this can include like law enforcement, first responders, hospitals, healthcare providers, workforce systems, faith-based organizations, just a multitude of different providers. I like to think that even while the clients are on the streets, we're building like an integrated care team around them of supports from different disciplines. So that care and support can happen wherever they're at in the housing process, or even if they're not in the housing process. Maybe they want to focus on other things before shifting their focus to housing, and that's okay too. We actually had a client years ago who was living in a tent under Chartres, who was adamant that they did not want to move into housing until they got income to pay rent. And we tried to explain to them that their rent would be entirely covered until they did get income, because once again, housing first. But they were like, no, I really want to work with someone to get Social Security benefits. And he did. So Outreach got him connected with one of Search's income programs, and he got approved for disability benefits. And then he was like, okay, when can I move in? So even though he didn't have to go, through that process, because once again, housing first, we respected his decision around that, and he got to be housed on his own terms. And I'm pleased to say that was back in 2019, and he is still stably housed to this day, never late on rent, and an all-around model tenant. So sometimes people just need those community supports to get back on their feet. And as you can see, there's a lot of other best practices and approaches we take to the work that we do. We're very intentional about the services we provide and take pride in doing them well. But those were just a couple that I wanted to emphasize. Next slide. And our agency has grown over the years and expanded to include new outreach teams. And as of today, we now have 6 outreach teams, all who are doing very similar work, but with unique focuses. So our mobile outreach program is the first and original outreach program for Search. This team is usually all over Harris County, responding to community calls and frequenting various areas. And they're not limited to a specific geographical location. And then on the flip side of that, we have our geographically bound outreach teams who specifically conduct outreach in the Midtown and downtown areas, where we see a lot of individuals who are experiencing homelessness congregate, which makes sense because when you're homeless, you need to find some way to survive. So it helps to reside as close as possible to where the services are, where you're able to get a warm meal, take a shower, do laundry, things like that. And then we have our PATH program, which is funded by SAMHSA, which is a mental health grant. And it's a type of focused outreach, which places an emphasis on getting our clients connected to mental health services. And then I'm skipping encampment on purpose because that's going to be my segue to the next presenter. But we do have our newest addition to the group, which we're very excited about, which is our new youth homelessness demonstration program. So several organizations in the community were recently awarded funds by HUD to serve youth and young adults 18 to 24, which is a population that is oftentimes overlooked, especially given what we call the invisible or hidden nature of how youth and young adults present in terms of homelessness. They oftentimes don't present in the same way or same areas that our older adult clients do, as they're oftentimes couch surfing between friends and families' homes or spending all-nighters at youth centers or things like that. So this program just recently launched and it's already started taking referrals, but that's just a teaser, and I'm sure you'll hear more about this program from us in weeks to come. But finally, we have our encampment response outreach program, which will be the highlight of our next portion of this presentation. This team is specifically focused on decommissioning the encampment sites that you may have seen throughout the city, notably the more recent closure right outside our building on Chartres under 59, which we know is a very high profile encampment given its visibility and size of the structures. And this team has been very busy these past few weeks between the Chartres decommissioning and the one they're currently working on decommissioning right now under 45 in the Emancipation area. And we are very grateful for our outreach team lead, Phil Terrasas, and encampment outreach specialist, Tiana Richards, who are kind enough to tear themselves away from the decommissioning site to serve as guest speakers on this very important work. So I'm going to pass it off to Phil first to have him first share about what we mean by decommissioning, how that comes about, and then the strategy behind the decommissioning process. So Phil, I'm going to pass it off to you.
Thanks. My name's Phil. I've worked here at Search for 6 years. I'm the team lead for our encampment team and our mobile outreach team. But I'm also a very active member of the encampment team. And Tiana and I have been, we're in the process of decommissioning an encampment this week. That's why my face is a little red. I've been out in the sun basically for 3 days. But yeah, I'm happy to take some time in the AC to chat with y'all about what decommissioning means, talk a little bit about the process. We see lots of information about how well Houston as a city has done, but we see more and more encampments. So sometimes the optics don't line up with what the data is saying. I know I've talked to people who are not directly affiliated with this, with social services, or and they're like, Houston, there's so many homeless people, and it's because you see encampments. And so we work very closely, like we've talked about, with the city of Houston, the Coalition for the Homeless, the mayor's office, HPD, the sheriff's office, to identify areas that are hazardous to the health of the people living there, and what's next to essentially close down an encampment. So as our leaders here meet with leaders from the city, leaders from the coalition, and decide, oh, here's what's next. We know in advance. So we're working with those people living in the encampment to start getting our ducks in a row, essentially. Initially, the engaging and the rapport building. Oftentimes, it's just about like what we can do right there in that moment. So from experience, we know that walking up to someone saying, "Hey, what's your name and what's your date of birth?" isn't the most sound strategy. So give folks some water, find out when the last time they ate, and if they need some food, and what we can do right there in that moment to help them. And then over weeks, we're showing up every single day. We start gathering information about what they need to get them from where they're at into housing. Anything that you or I would need to rent an apartment, state ID, social security card, birth certificate. Our approach is that if we can take care of those things on the front end, it's less time they have to spend during the actual housing navigation process. It's less for the next person to do. So sometimes we start from nothing, not a shred of evidence, just a name, maybe a date of birth, and a social. So sometimes it's about getting medical records or school records or alternative forms of ID to get a social, to get a state ID. And really, having conversations that, start to move the needle a little bit, talking about what it would be like to get off the streets, and like what they envision housing to be like for them, what they could do if they had somewhere safe and stable to go. So like I said, the coalition, leadership from Search, leadership from the city of Houston, they're identifying these encampments, and we have an idea of what's coming next. Sometimes we get a couple weeks notice, sometimes it's a little shorter, but we have an idea that an encampment has been selected for decommissioning, which essentially just means it's going to be, everyone there is going to be offered a housing opportunity, and it will eventually be closed down and subject to police enforcement. The week of an encampment, we call it a housing surge. Monday, HPD and their HOT team, and the HOT team is a homeless outreach team. They spend a lot of time in encampments anyways, so they're fairly well known. They're issuing everyone a notice to vacate, essentially saying that camping is against city ordinances, and after a set day, usually Thursday or Friday of that week, the city and HPD will begin enforcing those ordinances, which means tickets, possible arrests. Homelessness is not something that generally is solved by enforcement, which is why we've spent so much time doing the engaging, talking about housing, because that's the answer. I mean, it seems very simplistic, but the answer to homelessness is housing. So we take the opportunity to provide a solution, and that solution is low barrier shelter until a permanent housing placement can be found. Monday morning, and we've experienced this week. Every encampment's a little bit different, but Monday morning is usually, we're helping our clients process what's going on. That notice to vacate can be a little jarring, and can put our folks on the defensive, even if we, people we've talked to and worked with for weeks and weeks, all of a sudden they're told they need to leave, and the walls go up. So our team shows up with compassion and empathy, and to provide this opportunity, and really to provide some information so our clients can make an informed decision about what's next for them. So early in that week of a housing surge, we try to help our clients move from this is happening to me to I can choose what's best for me, and I can choose what happens next. Everyone in the encampment, they're free to relocate. That's always an option. It's not preferred, but the notice essentially tells them that they cannot camp there. They can pack up and leave by the end of the week, but preferably our option is to provide our clients an opportunity at the Navigation Center, which is a low barrier temporary housing solution for our clients in the encampment until they can find placement in permanent housing or rapid rehousing program. If they say yes and they want this opportunity, they're paired with a housing referral, which means they're off the wait list. They have a housing program matched to them, and we help them pack, we help them sort through their belongings, and they can begin working on their own independent housing right away. And this is housing through Search, through Avenue 360, through Harris County, through the Beacon. There's lots of different housing programs. Sometimes it is Search, and we're able to, set the stage for one of our navigators or case managers. But the idea is that, take this opportunity and you're off the housing wait list, which can take a while sometimes. But so they get to the Navigation Center, which is run by a partner, Harmony House. They're wonderful. They've created a great facility. It's go and come as you please. It's like I said, low barrier. We want clients to not feel like they're being put in an institution, and they can settle down and get a good night's sleep and essentially start working on their independent housing right away. And if we've done what we needed to do, we've already checked a lot of the boxes. So we don't want people staying at the Navigation Center long. We want IDs to be already in hand, social security cards. So then it's about finding a property and filling out applications. After we've gotten our folks out, Waste Management, Downtown Management District, TxDOT, they're clearing the areas to prevent backfill. We don't want someone to move out and then someone just to take the empty tent and say, okay, now I'm staying here. So we want the area cleared. Sometimes it's fenced, sometimes it's not feasible to fence off an area. But we do everything we can until the very last moment. At a previous closure off of 290, we had people literally waiting until Friday afternoon, and we stuck with it. We show up every day, multiple times a day. Hey, what do you think? And they're on the fence and they're back and forth. But once they decide, yes, I'm gonna take this opportunity, we help them pack and provide transportation, and we're holding on till there's no time left, and HPD has to come in and do the enforcement work. We have wonderful partners at HPD, the HOT team. They're fantastic, but we'll step back and let them sort of be the bad guy and the bearer of bad news, because everyone's been informed this is against city ordinances, and yeah, we'll take a step back and let the enforcement begin at that point. It's not always, sometimes there are challenging cases, and I'll turn it over to Tiana. She'll talk a little bit about her own experiences in working in encampments, what makes them so unique and difficult. And she may share a little bit about one of her clients. Tiana, you might be on mute.
Yeah, Tiana, we can't hear you.
Tiana, you want to come run to my office and you can hop on over here? Yeah, come on over. We improvise. That's what we do.
Oh, that works though. I think we just heard her. Oh, well.
Oh.
That's all right. She's just right down the hall. It'll take a minute. So just while we're waiting for Tiana to kind of share the human side of this work and the great success stories, just to kind of brag on our team and the community's work, Houston has closed over, I think it's over 40 encampments by this point. And so just a couple of weeks ago, we did that Chartres encampment, which is the one that runs right past the Search building. There were over 40 people living there, and the team today is working, or this week is working on the one that stretches kind of under the Pierce Elevated. We're calling it Emancipation, and that has about 40 to 50 people living there too. So it's a huge undertaking. There's a lot of success, though, a lot to celebrate. But Tiana, you're here now, so tell us about your personal experiences working with these groups.
Hello, everyone. Yes. So my name is Tiana Richards. I have worked with the encampment outreach team since last April, so almost a year. And before that, I was actually working with the partner at HCT, the House of Tiny Treasures that we talked about a little bit earlier. So a little over a year with Search as a whole. I have started getting my kind of client and caseload around May or June, and I have a client that I have actually been working with since late June, late July. And I kind of just want to talk about what that looks like on the ground, what that looks like, that partnership with those clients, long-term. Oh, I left my thing, that's okay. And just some of the challenges that we face while we are working with different encampments, working with different clientele and things like that. This client is roughly, I think he's in his late 50s, early 60s. He was very open to housing when I first spoke with him. When we kind of had that first meeting, he was very open to giving information and things like that. So that was wonderful. He had maybe a little setup kind of separate from everyone else, didn't really like to talk to too many people, so didn't want a lot of people around him, but my team was able to kind of just come in and speak with him, which is wonderful. And over time, we've seen some like hoarding tendencies, just a lot of things that he's been gathering around with him under that tent, under the bridge where he's staying at right now in his structure. So that's something that we kind of just go along with. He also has showing some signs of like identity crisis, just a lot of the different things that we're seeing while we're working with this client and other clients also, but with this client specifically, some identity crisis that we're seeing. I'm not really knowing for sure, believing that his name is one thing, but it's really another thing, legally and logistically. So that's just something that we are able to work with our partners to figure out ways that we can get that done, because documentation, of course, is something that we need to assist clients in the housing process. So just working through that day to day, making sure that we are seeing him constantly, a couple times a week, making sure that we're always showing him that we're present is something that really helps us while we're working with encampments, and making sure that they know we haven't forgot about you. We're going to work through kind of what you need us for at the time, whether it is documentation, whether it is some of the other services that Search provides. So that's always kind of nice for all of us to be able to come together and do. Some of the other challenges. Some other challenges that we see kind of facing when we're doing encampments is encampments really come together as a community. The individuals that stay at those encampments, you may see on the outside that it looks like, oh, it's just some, individuals that are experiencing homelessness, but to them, this is their home, this is their community. They take care of each other, they take care of the space that they're in. Though it may look a certain way to us on the outside, to them, this is where they live, and this is where, they want to take care of it and things like that. So you see that issue sometimes when you're working with encampments, that we have clients like my client too, who was ready for housing, ready to go in. We just waiting for a referral, and somebody came to stay in the encampment that really needed some assistance, really needed some help. My client was there to give them a tent, give them somewhere to stay. And after that said, I don't want to go anywhere until this person is taken care of. And that's something that you can't kind of be upset about, but you're just like, I understand that, you're caring, you're compassionate about this person. We started working with this other person too, to let him know like, hey, they're good to go. We're ready to get them going too. But that's just something, again, like you see sometimes that our clients kind of deal with, our clients see, but it's something that you just kind of roll with, and you keep going and making sure that you're focused on helping the client. You're not really necessarily focused on, something that for you want to make sure that the client is going first, of course, towards housing, but whatever that they want to do. Like Kelly shared, the client wanted income before they moved in. You may be like, no, just move in, but that client wanted to get income. So like, let's help, that client get income that way. So this is a client I'm still working with. We're actually going to start a decommissioning for where he's at next week. So that should be fun, very fun, very interesting. I'm looking forward to it. And yeah, that's kind of our encampment work and the things that we're doing throughout the weeks.
Thanks, Tiana.
Yeah.
So I think as you've heard, this team is incredibly passionate. This work is really, really, really hard to do. And I think one of the things I'm most proud of, here at Search and throughout Houston is that we're really approaching this major issue and concern with some practicality and also a lot of empathy and compassion. And so when I was in California, there was a question where they said, I think we were in a ballroom of 800 people, organizations from all over the country, raise your hand if you've been a part of a decommissioning. And I shot my hand up because I was so proud of the work that we're doing here in Houston. And I text Kelly to tell her like, wrong answer. I think there were like 8 of us in this ballroom that had, put our hands up, and I felt like the dagger eyes all come around, because in so many places right now, the decommissioning of encampments is really more of a law enforcement approach on encampments, and they're not wrapping around these offers for housing and care the way that we are in Houston. So it's really, it really is a unique approach. It's something, like I said, that as a provider, as a service provider, I'm deeply confident is the right way to be doing this. So, law enforcement alone is not the answer. Housing alone is not the answer. We really do need both things to tackle this tough issue. So with that, I want to turn it over and see if there's any questions that anyone has out there. It can be about what we discussed today. It can be about anything else related to search or homelessness. You're welcome to drop it in the chat box or to just hop off mute and ask. Anything? Really? No questions?
How many encampments is Search? What is Search's goal in terms of the number of encampments that you want to decommission for this year or annually? Do you all have a set number?
It's a great question. There's not a set number, and we really work together. This is a whole collaborative effort to do it. So Search doesn't set the pace. We work with our partners at the coalition, the city, the county, like Phil shared earlier, to decide the pace. What I will say is that because housing is such an important piece of this, we can only go as fast as that housing pipeline allows. So we're using what's now called the Navigation Center. For a while, Houston had created a temporary navigation center, which was actually a converted hotel, where we were temporarily lodging people. And then from there, we opened this permanent or semi-permanent structure, which is a converted school over on Jensen Drive, to act as the navigation center. So that space has the capacity for about 100 beds, I believe. And we're working with Harmony House to regulate that flow. As people move out of there and into permanent housing, then it creates more opportunity for us to close more encampments. So it's a really kind of calculated effort to make sure that everybody has an option for housing as we're doing that. One thing I'll say to that, though, is one of the major challenges that we have in making this go is that there's a housing affordability crisis in Houston. So even though we have resources to be able to put people into housing and pay for the rent, and we have the services to wrap around them, there's a shortage of affordable one-bedroom units that will take our clients and accept challenging lease backgrounds, challenging criminal backgrounds, and work with our projects throughout the city to get people housed. So it's kind of like a three-sided stool. You need the leasing dollars, you need the services, and you need the properties to say yes. And so that's the other piece of this, right? We've got the navigation center, but you need permanent places to put people. So it's a whole system effort.
And a second follow-up question, with the upcoming Final Four coming, we know typically that cities will kind of, decommission temporarily and things like that. And so just wondering, is there already a plan in place for that? And then my second follow-up question on the decommissioning is, there seems to be kind of a target focus closer to the downtown area. What is Search or other organizations doing in terms of decommissioning areas that are not necessarily right in the heart of downtown, i.e. 45 or 59 in Chartres, et cetera?
Sure. Great questions. Gail with the hard questions. So in the Final Four piece, I'll let Phil take a stab. I mean, I think there is kind of this this thought that when big events come to Houston that we go in, there's a vicious rumor years ago, right, that when the Super Bowl came that we went in and we swept and take busloads of people out to the suburbs. And I can tell you that's just not true. Now we certainly do feel the pressure from our city officials, from our partners everywhere to try and, make sure that our, streets are safe, appear safe. And that we're doing kind of what's in the best interest of the whole community. Phil, did you want to say something now? Go ahead.
About the second part of the question, yeah.
How do we decide and stuff, and what's the?
Well, yeah, we have started with Chartres and Pierce, which are some of the larger ones and are in the downtown area. And we soon are doing the first ones in what are like unincorporated territories. We have 45 South out to 610 next. And beyond that, there's encampments that I know nothing about that our partners are taking on that are in Clear Lake or out on 1960 and 290. There's we're spreading further and further outside the city to make sure those folks in those encampments are served and given opportunities at housing, because those encampments are just because they're outside the city, it doesn't mean they're any less dangerous or any less worthy of being, afforded an opportunity at housing. So we're so far we've worked very closely with HPD. The next few ones coming up will be with the sheriff's office because we're venturing further and further outside the city.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just to kind of add in, so about a year ago, different outreach providers here in Houston that have been doing this outreach work, we came together to create really a shared community encampment closure plan that's now kind of used across the country as a good model. And in that, we agreed upon what some of the kind of eligibility and qualifiers would be of things that we would consider for how we determine. And it takes into account things like the safety, the health of the encampment, the health of the encampment residents, the vulnerability of those people, the locations, that kind of thing. And so there's no like perfect math to exactly how we decide what that is, but there's a lot of factors that go into making these choices. And so the county and the city both have tremendous investments in all this work. And so they've really been coming together to help choose. And some of the biggest encampments and the most concerning encampments are right here in the immediate city limits, as you can imagine, because there's a lot of traffic, there's a lot of frequent, movement through, that kind of thing. So it poses a little bit more of a public health and safety issue.
Yeah. And my final question, since I'm either taking all the oxygen and no one else has a question.
You're fine.
What impact do you feel the closing, the Greyhound bus station, their lease is done in October, I think, of next year. So do you feel like that will have a positive impact in terms of encampments in that general area?
I do. I'd love to hear what the rest of the team thinks. I've done this work in back when Search was located down near Fannin. We were much closer, of course, to all of this. The Greyhound station and that McDonald's that was there, kind of notorious for just a lot of traffic and a lot of movement. And I think a lot of people equate that to homelessness and think that people down there are. But what we found from our street outreach, and we have a Midtown Management District team that does outreach down there in collaboration with HPD. We go out. As soon as they see HPD officers, people scatter, which to me tells me that they're up to no good, right? And it allows us to kind of work with people who are really needing our help and our support. So I think it's a high drug traffic area. There's sometimes gang involvement down there, that kind of thing. I think it can only bring good things for our community that it's moving and being displaced. But Kelly, do you want to share? I'm sure you have some thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I just echo that as well. I mean, what Alexis described is kind of what we call a hot spot, right? So an area that a lot of, individuals who are homeless or maybe even not homeless frequent and kind of return to. And as she mentioned, right, the Greyhound bus station was one of those, that McDonald's down there was one of those. And that's definitely the observations that my Midtown outreach team has really observed, that, when they come out there or they see like law enforcement presence. I mean, even without law enforcement presence, they're just kind of going out there as a team together. They've built so much, trust and rapport with the people out there that they know who is really homeless and who's not. And we know that because we're working with vulnerable populations, that individuals who are engaging in criminal activity are going to take advantage and prey on individuals who may be desperate for income or opportunities. And being able to kind of plant themselves in those areas. And of course, with the Greyhound, bus station itself, right? I mean, it's transportation, right? Between, connecting folks from all over the country, like passing through, so trafficking absolutely can always be a big issue there. So I would agree with Alexis that my observation is that I think it will make a pretty big impact.
I have a question if I can jump in.
Yes, please.
Hi, it's Liz McGuffey, and I'm actually calling from the road. So what I'm going to do is pop out my 3 questions, and then I'm hoping one of you all will remute me so that I don't have to figure out how to remute myself.
Sure.
So I have 3 quick questions. One is, can you talk a little bit about whether or not volunteers are an asset or a challenge in the encampment work? How you're able to meet the needs of those communities, those sub-communities that exist within the encampments? Are you able to co-house anybody? And then lastly, just, you kind of mentioned this, so I just like clarification. Are you starting to see that because Houston is getting so much coverage, press nationally for doing well with homelessness, that you're actually beginning to see people actively seek out your services, or maybe even be sent by other communities that don't have services? And then if somebody will remute me, that would be wonderful.
Sure thing. Okay, I'm going to mute you. Super good questions. All right, so I'll take a stab and then I'll kind of toss to the team on some of these. I think the volunteer question is a tough one. Search, we love volunteers. We rely on our volunteers to help and support the work. I think when it comes to encampments, because of the nature of it, the speed with which we're going in, the relationship building, the trust, the law enforcement aspects, we've not really included volunteers in that work. And I don't think we really plan to. It takes, like I said, a lot of coordination. It's really important that we're sending the correct messages, that kind of thing. Now, Search does have other outreach teams, and we do enjoy having volunteers help out there, but we find that it's best when volunteers can commit to regular volunteerism, and they can really get to learn the safety protocols and rules and supports and how to best engage with people. So I hope that kind of answers that question. What I will say, though, is sometimes on the flip of this, I'll take this opportunity to share how volunteers cannot be helpful in when it comes to the encampment work. So a lot of people are very caring and compassionate towards our neighbors experiencing homelessness in the encampments, frequently giving out tents, providing lots of food, lots of those kinds of things. It makes it much harder for us to close the encampments when those things are happening. When it makes it easy for people to accept the resources there, or they have a lot of stuff and belongings and things, it becomes even harder and harder on our teams. So we've been working kind of with the city and with waste management and all of that to really try and figure out how we limit those things. It's not that we don't want people to have access to it, but we really need to be thoughtful in how they're offered so they don't come in conflict with what we're doing. On the last encampment closure, I know I went out to try and help a little bit on the final day, and we were helping a woman sort through bags of clothing that had clearly just been dropped off to her. She never even opened them. And, you know, it was stuff that was important to her, and it added 3 hours of time, right, of going through those clothes just painfully with her, trying to let her let go of those things. So I think sometimes well-meaning, you know, supports can be problematic. When it comes to like, are people coming here? I want to answer that one too. So maybe, I don't know. You know, we don't have the data for sure to support it. It's certainly one of the claims that we hear. I'm going to be really honest. I don't think that people go from city to city because they hear that the homeless services are better in one place or another. People are homeless, and it stinks to be homeless no matter where you're at. What I will say though is that we have a lot of things in place that we try and safeguard against it. So the teams work together to earmark who all those people are in those encampments, and we track and use data for weeks at a time. So even if people are trying to move into areas where they hear we're doing encampment work, it won't work. They'll be offered outreach services, but they won't be offered access to housing. Phil, do you want to take a stab at how we address the community need piece? I know we're right at time.
Yeah, so I'll be quick to be respectful of everyone's time. Yeah, you know, it's something we see often. We saw this week, we saw, you know, yesterday. With our current encampment decommissioning, we had a guy that was ready to go Monday morning, but his buddy had taken off to go make some money, got a quick job, and he was like, I don't want to leave without him. His stuff's here, you know, and we are not offering housing with conditions. We are not going to say, well, you need to take it now, or it's now or never. We were respectful and we understood, you know, that's his partner. That's his guy. Like, we weren't going to say, you know, pack your stuff, you need to go right now. So, you know, 8:30 Tuesday morning, they were both packed, ready to go. And, you know, it's things like that. That's the trust we built with our clients, and we're not trying to force them into anything. This is their life, and we're not the experts there. They are. Additionally, at the same encampment, we've got 2 gentlemen who are down at the end by themselves, and they ask about rooming together at the navigation center. Everyone has a roommate. They don't like anyone. They like each other, and you know, that's something that our partners are going to say, oh, we can't make exceptions, we can't do this and that, but they're humans, you know, they have hearts just like we do. So if it comes to let these 2 guys who are buddies room together, or they're not going to go, you know, that's our job as advocates for our clients. And more often than not, our partners will listen to things like that, because like I said, they have hearts, they understand. If it's between keeping 2 people on the streets or getting 2 people off, like, well, let's do what we can to get these guys safe and stable. And I get it, they're old and they don't like many people. They don't want to be around some rambunctious younger roommate. They like each other, so they know that they're each other's sleeping habits and that they're not going to snore and keep each other up. So our partners were willing, and yeah, that's part of our role as advocates. We're making sure our clients are getting done what they need to feel safe and start to rebuild that community.
Yeah, and I think that
sorry.
That it kind of just to highlight of our approach, you know, at Search, you view it as a community, you view it as individuals and humans. And so getting in there and getting to know who's influential, who's important, why they're there, why they don't want to go, all of that, it really helps inform so that we can work with each person where they're at, and not just as a decommission, as a closure.
And is there sometimes the opportunity to put 4 or 5 people into proximate housing so that in their long-term or permanent housing, they can remain a community? Or is
Yeah,
that just a bridge too
great
far?
question. No, it's a great question. So in Houston, permanent supportive housing is mostly, unless you're a household and you're going kind of in on the lease. So that could be a couple, it could be a family. That kind of tends to be it, is like it's one person, one voucher, one unit. There is a lot of great work being done though all throughout the country around shared housing, which is kind of, it makes sense. I mean, how many of you probably had a roommate before you ever lived on your own independently, right? College alone, right? We get assigned roommates. So I think that that's a really interesting model. We have tried it a bit here in Houston in smaller doses. I imagine it's something that's going to come into play, especially as the cost of housing continues to rise. So there's just some logistical pieces to work out around how you put subsidies together and on units, but it definitely can be done. And I think, like I said, it's something that's kind of trending. We also do have different properties. There's 2 different types of housing. We can talk much more about this in a future session, but when people move into permanent supportive housing, there are models that are congregate, where a bunch of folks who are similar experiences all live together, and they're scattered site models. So when we know that somebody wants to live with other people that are like them and have shared experiences, we'll try and steer them towards congregate living so that they can be closer to others who might have shared experiences and have the services right on site.
How long how many clients do you have right now, and how long do you give them the wraparound service?
Okay, so that's a big and complicated question. I guess the short answer is in about a year's time, Search serves about 3,000 plus clients. Many of them are outreach clients, and that range of service can vary from one time to every week for a year or plus, right? When it comes to the encampment work, generally we're working with groups for just 1 week. And when we transition them into that navigation center and the housing, someone else takes over. And so we try and do a warm handoff so that those services go to them, but we really try and peel back and remove the services. And our housing projects, where Search provides case management and support, most of that is long-term. It's as long as their lease is in place. So it can be years of support and service. I know we're past time. I love the questions. I'm happy to stick around if there's anything else that I can answer. But we sure appreciate everybody joining and continuing to dive more deeply into this really complicated issue and this work. We really appreciate your time today and just your commitment to Search and beyond. So hopefully we'll see you all again soon. We do these speaker series about once every other month or so, different topics. Don't be shy. Please join again. Paula, do you have it looks like you have your hand up. I'm happy to try and answer your question.
Yes, so I do have a question regarding the programs. Like, do y'all do referral from other agencies as well? And I would also like some more information on the youth program that you talked about earlier.
Sure. So when it comes to referrals, so for our housing projects, both permanent supported and rapid rehousing, we are committed to working with the community's coordinated access system. So we receive all of the referrals to our housing through that coordinated approach. So that really is the best way to get people into housing, is they need to be assessed for housing through the coordinated access system. Easiest way to do that is to go to the Beacon. There's also a call-in line, but really I think the Beacon is the best way to do it. When it comes to
the Beacon is one of our community partners as well.
Yeah, when it comes to outreach services and that kind of thing, we have those different geographical regions. We have a couple different services. We can't be everything to everyone. Of course, Houston is huge. So it never hurts to connect with us and just let us know the area that you're concerned about. If it's an area that we frequent, we're always happy to go and check it out. If not, we work with so many other partners that might be able to, and we can happily point in the right direction. When it comes to trying to help someone on the street, I usually recommend to encourage people to go to shelter or to go to places like the Beacon or other drop-in day centers. You can definitely come to Search, and we try and help provide information and referral as much as we can, but there really isn't a lot of service that people can walk in and receive here at the agency. So Kelly's a great resource. She already hopped off, but I'm happy to share her email address. She can answer any questions about anybody you're concerned about or how to do referrals. She works with all those front end services. She's also the person to connect with about YHDP, the Youth Homeless.
Okay, perfect.
Project. Yeah, so I'll put her email down here. There you go.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Any other questions?
No, that is it. I'm going to go ahead and drop off. Thank you so much for answering my questions.
Yeah, of course. Is it Linnea or Linnea?
Linnea.
Hey, Linnea.
Hi. And this might be something, this is the first, I guess, webinar that I've ever joined with you all. Maybe this is a question for another webinar, but in terms of, you mentioned that there's a shortage, of part of the problem with homelessness. There's a shortage of the, affordable housing. And I was just wondering how you guys, how does that sort of chain work? Is that something that you guys work with cities to, kind of show, here's the data, here's what needs to happen in terms of beds, or just that whole process? Because it does seem like that is a big missing link.
Yeah, no, it is a great question, and probably something we'll do a whole series on about housing and affordability and really.
Okay, I figured that's kind of a big thing.
Yeah, I mean, and it's tough to answer. I would say what the brief answer I can give you is kind of the homeless system, works alongside, the housing department, the city of Houston, the housing departments within, the county, to really try and kind of adjust and assess like the needs. And so we also partner really closely with the Houston Housing Authority and the Harris County Housing Authority. That's generally who provides the subsidies, the rental dollars to help us get people into housing and to pay for it. What's tough is like, basically what we need here in Houston is we need more landlords, we need more actual properties. And the development of properties takes a lot of time. So even as we get closer and closer to assessing what those numbers look like, you have to have housing, developers who really want to do this work. There's not a lot of money in it. And, there's a lot of affordable housing projects going up. I was at City Hall about a week ago, and they were sharing, all these construction projects that are in place, but those projects, although they're affordable housing, still won't be quite what our clients need. Right. So search, we also have hired a landlord specialist, so someone who works, with our properties. I think one of the most important things that we can do is, aside from just gaining new landlords, we have to keep the ones we have. We have great relationships with some of them, so just continuing to make sure that our clients, can work and support, and that landlords want to continue working with us.
Okay, yeah, that's all great information. And then just this is a quick question. I know I was approached, by someone that it looked like they were experiencing homelessness and needed help, and it didn't seem like there was really an easy way to call or, to find some help for this person. I was there with my daughter, so I wasn't going to, do anything to kind of jeopardize her safety, but obviously wanted to see if I could connect him with someone that could help. And just knowing, what are those easy resources that if something like that happened, you could help.
Yeah, absolutely. This is like the #1 question that everybody asks, and we're really trying to work on better answers. I so appreciate that people want to be helpful, and it's hard sometimes even for us to answer it. There is a help card that's available on the Coalition for the Homeless and the Way Homes website. It's a virtual card, but you can get familiar with some of the resources. They're working on one that can be printed. And it kind of really points people to shelters and to the coordinated access lines and that kind of thing. I think personally, like what I usually do is I refer people to the Beacon. I do think that is the best and the best first stop. If you're really ever concerned about somebody though that you see out on the street and you can't stop, but really are concerned someone's emaciated or not well, and you can tell that they're visibly homeless, my recommendation is to call the Houston Police Department's HOT team, which is the Homeless Outreach Team. So they're a division of the mental health branch of HPD, and this is exactly what they do. They're actually the largest outreach team in our city. They go out, they have access to different services. They're incredibly friendly and well respected by the community. So I think that they're a great resource. When you're concerned, just you can call the non-emergency line and ask for the HOT team.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to hop too. I appreciate you guys staying on longer.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody. It was so great to see all of you, and thanks for the amazing questions. Hopefully we'll see you again soon. Bye, guys.